been a wonderful life. Just have lots and lots of memories. My mom always grew up in the country and only went through 7th grade education.
Uh-huh.
Back then, which was normal, really. But my mom, yeah, was always a farm lady, was married when she was 17 years old. My dad was 21. They probably knew each other back in school, grade school. As far as I know, my dad was the only one that she ever dated, or she never ever talked about anyone else. But my mother was a saint. She was the most easygoing person. Everyone always said, Ruth is a saint with all those children. And never ever. My mother didn't get too demanding of any of us. Just so easygoing. But my dad was a different story. Yeah. We knew all he had to say was say something, and we knew what to do. It was a shame to maybe be afraid of your dad, but that's how it was. But always showed respect. Never showed the love for him like we did our mother. Because she was just so, she's the one that taught us everything. My dad was crippled, so he was kind of limited as what he could do. He became crippled when he was quite young from swimming in a stagnant water that he got a bad infection in the bone in his leg, and that caused him to be crippled. But then when they retired from farming, they lived in town then. My brother had bought, when they sold the farm, my brother had bought that house for them to live in the rest of their life, as long as they were able. I had 8 sisters and 5 brothers. I don't know how my mother did it with all those children. Because she'd have help maybe from Grandma, or at an older age, I had a great aunt that came and lived with us, and then she had her to take care of along with us, which was, by that time, 4 of us were in high school at the same time. And I wish, when you look back, you wish you'd have done more for your mother and taking care of great aunt. You wish you'd have done a lot more. She was such a sweetheart. But she took care of my dad at home, and he died just in his sleep at night, which was a blessing that he went first.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 4 years old, and I had a little sister, an older sister, 6 years old, that died. So it would have been 9 sisters and 5. I remember that because they kept him at home at that time. There were so many of us. There would be, the older ones would be gone, and the most of us that were at home were about eight children. And then they gradually just left. Living on a farm, and in a large home, just played with each other, played with things like had to cut paper dolls out of a catalog.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have toys. We had summertime, had swing set, a big old tree. We were satisfied with that, and whatever you had, we were all happy. We were always dressed well. My mother saw to that. Especially when we would go to church on Sunday, we would wear our best shoes and dresses. When we were quite young, my mother made our clothes out of flour sacks or seed sacks. Feed would come in. That would be the material she'd have to. You could wash it up and then make our clothes, which was a lot of work for her, but she loved it. And as the years go by, you had chores to do. You just knew it had to be done, and walk to school, to and from school. Something you loved, though. You'd run through the pastures, take shortcut through the pastures and climb fences. And I was a runner. If I would run, I usually went around the road. They weren't called streets, they were just country roads. About 3 miles, but you never ever had homework or anything to do. Everything was done at school. One room school with 8 grades and 1 teacher, which was probably most ever would have been like 14, 16 kids at one time for her. But it's hard to believe that we learned what we did learn. I just remember the teachers, always liked them, and they were, of course, very strict. No one was ever out of line in school like they are nowadays. We just knew better. There were only 4 of us in our class, and then one girl was out for several years. She had rheumatic fever, and at that time they kept him at home at bed rest. So they were homeschooled. And yes, we 3 graduated them from 8th grade. And that was an experience too, going from country school to a large high school, which was large to us. Because I think when I started high school, there were like 60 some in as a freshman. And then it kept dwindling down to a lot less. But loved high school. We had our, what we call GAA, that's Girls Athletic Association. Girls were restricted, actually. You couldn't play other schools. But yeah, I was active in everything. Softball, track, and basketball. But like I say, basketball then, it was half court for girls. And I don't know when they changed that, but yes, always look forward to the gym class and being real active. I had to study a lot because in a country school you don't get a lot of learning, but I got just average grades in high school, and I think maybe I was a junior or so when I decided to go into nursing. I had older sisters. The 3 older sisters went to school, high school. No one went to college until I had a brother that's 6 years older than I went to college. He was the very first one to go to college. And we were the only two out of all 14 that went on after high school. And then I went to nursing because I worked for a lady in the summertime. My last high school year, that summer I took care of 2 little boys, and she was a nurse at a doctor's office, and she kind of got me interested into going into nursing. And that was my experience, that I knew that was the proper thing to do. I was real interested in a boy that went away to college, and that didn't last because he met someone else in college, which was very hard. But then I met Papa. I had dated like 2 other guys when I was in nursing, but when I met Papa, I knew he was the one.
They used to have, at St. Anne's, on Sunday night, they used to have teenage dance. It had to be, I think it was junior in high school up till about 20 years old. Well, she was in nurses training, and friends of hers that lived in East Moline, they brought her down to those dances, and that's how I met her. Next thing you know, I was running back and forth to Aledo.
You usually went in groups. There'd be several boys and several girls. We'd all do the same thing until we got interested in a certain one, and then started dating, which was, very little, but because I was in my 2nd year of nursing when I met him, and then he was drafted into the Army. So he had given me a diamond before he left for, he had sold his car and bought my ring. It's a little old car, and that's all he had to buy my ring. And then when he was in the Army, you couldn't be married when you were nursing anyway. So when he came home, and I had graduated from nursing, he came home on leave after his basic training, and wanted to get married before he went to Korea. That was during the Korean War. And so he came home from basic, and we were married and only together for 10 days. Then he was sent to Korea. It was a small wedding because we only, the priest had to get permission from the bishop for us to get married because it was during Lent. So you weren't allowed a large wedding, but I did have a wedding gown and a wedding, and our reception was at his mom and dad's on a Sunday after we were married kind of like on a Wednesday, and reception on a Sunday, because you couldn't get married on a Sunday during Lent. It was different rules. And I worked in nursing while he was gone for 16 months, I believe it was. I roomed at a friend's house for $10 a week, and I made very little money, but to me it was a lot. I don't remember the wage at that time, but it was very good for the nursing. When you did go through nursing, you got room and board and your books, and I believe altogether it was only $500, which was a lot of money back then for my parents, who had not a lot, but enough to help send me through. I think my older brothers that were farming, kind of pitched in and helped with the expense. So. when he came home, then we just could only afford an apartment to live in. He worked, he was at an apprenticeship at the newspaper, the Herald in East Moline, and made very little, but enough to have an apartment and get a car. I had gotten a car before he came home when he was over in Korea. The first car was a 1953 Pontiac, brand new. I had saved up enough money for the down payment from nursing and then made payments on it. And just worked and then had ups and downs, of course, and had to quit work because I was pregnant with Teresa at that time. And so then that was hard with me not working. Back then, you weren't allowed to work only until about your 5th month of pregnancy. Then you had to stop. That was just the rule of the hospital administrator. Didn't want pregnant girls working. So we were in an old apartment, very, very old, but it was all we could afford. It was 3 rooms, living room, bedroom, kitchen. And it was in a duplex of a house, and you walked in and into the living room. Then we had, in the bedroom, when Teresa was born, we had a baby bed in there, along with our bed, and it worked out fine. We were just so thrilled with your first baby. And then, of course, 15 months later, and Jeff was born, and had 2 baby beds in with our bedroom. Yes. And we had to go upstairs and share a bathroom. The people that owned the home, they had roomers upstairs. But we were happy. It didn't matter. And then when I was pregnant with Mark, then we were able to rent a little house, which was quite nice, just like a new one to us. It was just wonderful to have our own home and have a shower. Didn't have a bathtub, so bathing was done like in the kitchen, in the sink. 18 months after Jeff, Mara was born, and then 15 months after that, Brenda was born when we lived in our little rented house, and she's the one, she had lots of problems. She had lots of, born with a heart defect and was quite ill a lot. It was very, very hard caring for her because her heart would stop occasionally. You'd have to. And about 3 times she had to be hospitalized and brought back, and just a miracle that she got through it, but she didn't get real healthy until she was about 3 or 4, between 3 and 4. I'd have 6 children if I had to do it over again, because it was so much fun. Back then you didn't have disposable diapers. You just did all your laundry, and I loved doing that. Hanging out all those diapers outside, and in the winter you'd hang them down the basement, because you didn't have to work like they do now. I did go to work. I went to work on weekends when Papa was home. Fred was home with the kids. And then when Brenda was born, of course, then I did work again until she got well. I just worked part-time, only had 1 car, so I had to do things all together, all at once, and then I could use the car like on Fridays when he got home from work to get groceries and that. And that I look forward to. That was my outing for the week. But we'd all go to church together, and then when I worked on weekends, we would all go like at 5:30 in the morning, and then Fred would take me to work and with all the kids in the car, and then go home and then come back and pick me up. Life was quite different, but it was wonderful. When I was pregnant with Steve, we had bought our first house. That's how it was. And when I was 8 months pregnant with him, we moved into our new home out in Glendale. And that was just so thrilling to have a 3-bedroom house with 5 children at that time when he was born. We had our friends, and all our friends always had several children. The Burnses had 8, the Snowards had 7. All of the relatives had several children. When we all got together, it was quite a gathering. Went a few years, almost 4 years before Gary was born. And we still lived out in Glendale. So 6 children in the 10 years. Teresa and Jeff went to St. Anne's School, and then when we moved here, Gary was in kindergarten. So when we moved here, Teresa started. She graduated from St. Anne's and started UT High School then when we moved here, and Gary was starting kindergarten. So that was a wonderful time when we moved to this house. We had a basement for them to play in. They always had their things to play with. Later on, had a foosball table, ping pong table, and of course, we had one TV, and everybody watched the same thing on one TV. It's funny how we first see TV. We were married and got to see the first TVs ever, because all it was a little a station with weather on it. I think there was probably 1 or maybe 2 stations, and that was it, with weather. And then they started with a little bit of news. Then by then, when the kids were grown, they had several stations, several programs. We all sat together at mealtime, everyone, high chair on down. And they'd take turns helping with dishes, and Fred has always helped with dishes from the time first one was born. And then when the kids got old enough they could drive and help out. Yeah, we've been blessed with so much. Blessed with all our children, and then all our grandchildren, which was happiest times, and great-grandchildren to make it even happier. I still have my good faith. I don't go to the Catholic Church anymore, but I have my church service on TV. God understands. You know, when you're older, like I know now, the time comes, it's just the way it's going to be. And you accept it. Because of good faith.
Mm-hmm.
And all. Yeah, this is wonderful of you to do this.